Welcome on World IP Day, 26th of April 2021. And I have three panelists with me today, Nakul Sher Dalal, Elena. Elena is joining us from UK, and I have Bukola who's joining us from Nigeria. I would like to start this webinar with very short prayer because we know that around the world, our friends, our family around the world, people are suffering with COVID. And unfortunately, in India, where me and Nakul are based, we are facing very serious crisis. So we will observe a 1 minute silence and then we will start the seminar. Om Shanti. So we are introducing Nakul Sher Dalal, who is an IP expert, has been recognized as one of the leading IP expert, not only in India, but he's received very recently an accolade from an international organization. I think, Nakul, I would pass it over to you to very quickly tell our viewers about what exactly do you do.
Yeah, so I'm the founder of NS Legal. That's my firm's name. It's called NS Legal. And it mainly practices intellectual property, litigation and non-litigation, both including intellectual property strategies, applications, registrations, prosecutions, and IP portfolio management as well. My major focus, although not in practice, it just comes along, but happens in spreading IP awareness in the society through my various designations in honorary organizations like SOCHM, Knowledge Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Asian African Chamber of Commerce and Industry, GR Foundation, to name a few. So on World IP Day, I could think of nobody but Julie Desai, because I have done a lot of intellectual property awareness sessions with her, and the zeal that I feel that she has for intellectual property is, I think, above something else. So let's go ahead.
So thank you, Nakul. I think since we are introducing you from India, I would like to introduce another speaker who is in UK. Elena is a senior manager in KPMG UK and focuses on consulting financial services clients. Last year, she was recognized by 2 awards in UK technology as one of the future women leaders in the industry. So Elena, do you want to tell my viewers about your thoughts on, and I understand that you are from Russia, so what is the IP situation for women startup in the UK and in that context in Russia as well?
Of course. So generally, I want to highlight that the startup culture in UK is quite big. So, for example, only last year, there were about 672,000 startups which were founded in the UK, and that's 1,850 startups a day. So that's a large number.
Yes.
There are quite good laws around the IP in the UK, and I do want to say that the culture around the IP is generally good because people don't necessarily want to go and steal your stuff. But what I think is very, very important, in particular for the women founders, is that they may want to think about IP earlier in the process. At the moment, there are so many startups and some of them fail in the first year. So sometimes startups, they just evolve, they see how it goes and then only start worrying about IP later in the process. Whereas perhaps they could start focusing on it from the very, very start. I think what is very important from the women perspective is protecting their rights around the IP would elevate their position in terms of the equality, and this will ultimately help the long-term economic growth. Specifically to your point about Russia, I think historically IP is perhaps less culturally understood. So generally there is a bit of a perception that you can steal stuff or you can copy paste stuff, even starting with small things like videos, audios, and it's just perhaps part of the culture. And then I think when people come to the startups, they don't think, again, early enough in the process, and there is much more danger, much more risk that somebody may take away your intellectual property. I think with time, the laws have been becoming better and better. But I think from the culture perspective, people still may think that they can go and take something away from others, which perhaps is slightly different from the UK.
Yeah, I think it is a great perspective. Okay, we will take some questions at the end of this session, but I would like to introduce Bukola now. She is a lead strategist and founder of Mom in Tech, a tech community to encourage stay-at-home moms and mom to embrace tech and see how their set skills can be tailored towards a tech solution. She is a World Plus digital ambassador and also a judge for technovation. So Bukola, over to you. Do you want to talk about the IP rights in startups in Africa region?
Okay, yeah, thank you so much, Julia. Yeah, so I think in Africa, there is IP rights as well. But for startups, I am going to tailor it down to where I am right now, and I'm in Nigeria. So Nigeria has this copyright laws that's under intellectual properties, patent laws. But the thing about the laws for startups is that it's not mandatory. So once you even have a startup and you register your business, you necessarily don't have any law protecting your products or whatever service you're rendering. So it's now left for you to do that, which most people shy away from doing, probably because of the cost, or they don't really see it as being important at the moment. And for me, I think we need to change that narrative for startups. No matter how, once you're starting something, you should be ready to protect it, because, and then there's no anything about. So that's in Nigeria right now. It's not people tend to just copy people's products, people's project ideas. Well, I feel like once there is once there is an IP over your brand, whoever does it will face the. So that's a bit I can say right now.
Yeah, I think it is a great perspective, Nakul, and I think let us talk about how much work as an advocate for IP rights we need to do around the world, especially in a developing country. So Nakul, over to you. I will let you talk about the generalized information about IP rights for women, and then we will take some questions. Over to you.
Yeah, sure. So World IP Day, this year's theme suggested by World Intellectual Property Organization is the ideas of SMEs and how they are going to rule the market. So that is the theme that is the WIPO body has suggested, which concentrates on small enterprises and their importance in intellectual property. Coming to what you said, as far as the startups are and the women in intellectual property are concerned, they are doing some wonderful things. Most concentration of women, I feel, is in the field of designs and copyrights to begin with. Copyright being the most sought after field by women. And then the next criteria of the women entrepreneurs falls in trademarks and designs. And the last of them is patents. Not to forget trade secrets, but India does not have a statute regarding trade secrets. We depend on trade-related intellectual property aspects, treaty, Article 39, 1 and 2 for it. But still, all the women-led startups and women-led intellectual properties are strongly documented by them, nevertheless. Over the last year, I have seen this trend where more and more women are coming forward in India to take advantage of the startup intellectual property protection scheme which the central government has floated, and they are taking advantage of the rebates that are being given in various intellectual property application fees and making themselves feasible for the intellectual property application. Having said that, the organizations which are not small enterprises but are still led by women, I think are making very good calls. Day before yesterday, there is one organization. The applications are still sub judice, so I won't be able to name it, but she's an entrepreneur in her 40s, and she just made an application of 200 international applications in various countries where she proposes to export her product to, which is a medicine. If I compare it with a regular client of mine, maybe the client wouldn't have taken such a bold call, which I found it was very correct and very aggressive as far as the intellectual property application is concerned, because what she saw was a long-term perspective in intellectual property. She'll get a 10-year leeway with those trademark applications in various countries of the world, where she'll be adding those, intellectual property applications in her portfolio. So, she came to me directly and said this. I didn't. I mean, she didn't want me to counsel her. So that was, I think, a big development and a remarkable aspect which I noted, which stands out for me just a couple of days ago, which was a very aggressive and bold step by a women entrepreneur. The startups are concerned, I think the previous 6 months post-COVID relaxation have been very fascinating. They are up there. All they want is good intellectual property applications, which give them a leeway in the market where they already are now beginning startups with a legal budget. So let's say somebody is beginning a startup, he'll already mark an intellectual property budget. He'll already mark an enforcement budget, because the startups have clearly understood that the intellectual property applications in India are faster now. The trademark applications take 7 months. A patent application takes around 24 to 36 months. A design application takes around 10 months. So they have realized the importance of having an intellectual property in their bag in just under a year. So they seriously consider applying trademark designs and copyrights at one go. So when they liquidate their startups when it's over, they have a good intellectual property portfolio to still want to enforce their intellectual property. Which the example which Kola gave. So in that scenario also, they already have an earmarked budget for that on the beginning of it, and that's the way they go about it. So this is the scenario with women in startups as far as that is concerned.
So Nakul, I see that you are wearing a Formula One merchandise today. So what is the reason behind that?
So since a long time, I just wanted to connect the sport to intellectual property, and this year's theme of small enterprises bringing ideas to the market just gave me a moment to share with all of you. So Formula One is not just about 22 cars on the grid and around 20 trucks across the world. It's much more than that. So Formula One gave thermal efficiency to the road cars. Eventually, it was made for Formula One cars, but the Formula One technology was then passed on to the road cars, where they produce 20% more power, and then they save 26% CO2 emissions, which was taken out by small enterprises to these big car manufacturers. Then very quickly, the Formula One technology related to data and sensor controls is being used in underground and overground transportation systems across the world, and also in air traffic control towers to detect the schedules of flights and which are the flights that are proposed to be late, etc., etc. So this is how Formula One is contributing to the world by sharing technological innovations since I think last decade. And it's very important to discuss this on Intellectual Property Day.
Yeah, true. So what's the reason behind IP surge in SME, if you want to share that with our viewers?
Yeah, so intellectual property for SMEs is a big thing. It might not be a big thing for multinational or organization who has achieved some feat, but for startup, I think it's absolutely imperative that intellectual property strategy should be in place. Having said that, a lot of startups that I deal with day in and day out nowadays always design intellectual property budget. At the same time, they come up with a startup. They have their angel investors fund these budgets and also have enforcement budgets, which comes as a surprise. But this last 6 months, they also come out with an enforcement budget, because the dilution of intellectual property is much faster, especially in times like COVID, when somebody wants to harper on somebody else's innovation, creation, branding, or design, and just make merry, while a startup is just a sitting duck with its budgets. But the scenario is changing. Not only national, but startups have to think about in an international intellectual property portfolio, because eventually the world is shrinking, as we all know. It's going to be more global and less national. COVID has taught us that how fast we can shed away with the physical international conferences and bring it, into a room within a day. Same
So, do you
things
think
will be happening to your intangible assets and businesses. Yes.
do you think that the Indian SMEs have explored their full potential when it comes to intellectual property?
As far as startups exploring their full potential is concerned, I would answer that in negative because there is a long way to go. They still have to learn the ropes of, having a respect for intellectual property awareness and trying to learn what intellectual property is. Let's say what I discussed in the previous answer is the behavior of 15 to 20% startups from India. But, or let's say 50% of startups that I come across as advisor. But other startups, they are simply not, able to connect themselves with the finesse of intellectual property in the sense that they do not adapt that thinking that intellectual property, trademark, patent, design, or copyright is something very important, which is going to save our business which is going to, increase the valuation of our businesses at certain point in time. Not only that, they do not think of the aspect of documenting their proprietary information well and lose out on competitors in a very short run.
I think that is also something Bukola and Elena very quickly in Russia, Bukola in Nigeria and the African region talked about. So I think for SMEs, there is a long way to go as far as intellectual property rights is concerned. So Nakul, tell us, what should SMEs of India focus more on weaving their success stories?
So SMEs have to focus more on their applications to begin with, what they want to protect and what they do not want to protect. They need to ask themselves questions that why would they like to do so. Take an help of a good facilitator which has been provided by the government to the SMEs and the startups, or if not, then at least go and visit the awareness programs being done by various industry associations, which we all know. SHM does it for an instance, and a lot of other private organizations also do it. So startups need to gather themselves, SMEs need to gather themselves, and understand the concept of intellectual property, how fast it can help them grow, and why is it important to protect it today so that they can reap the benefits later.
Absolutely true. So thank you for joining us. I'm extremely thankful to you, Nakul Sheradalal, Elena and Bukola, for joining us for this very interesting and a wonderful brainstorming seminar on World IP Day 2021. And we hope that we are able to change some mindsets as far as intellectual property rights are concerned. Thank you so much.
And thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.